It's an opportunity to have bilateral meetings. Nigeria should be one of the hubs, manufacturing hubs for Japan to be assembling cars in.
High expectations for President Buhari and Nigeria's participation as TCAD 7 opens today in Yokohama, Japan.
Vice President Oshibajo flags off trader money in Kefi, says the administration will sustain social investment programs
of the traders who have done so well after getting their first loans.
Anti-Human Trafficking Agency in Nigeria, NAPTIP, refutes human rights violation allegation.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall continue our conversation on the proposed review of the revenue allocation formula.
All right, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. It is the midweek edition of the program, and yesterday we began a discussion on a review, or would I say the proposed review of the revenue allocation formula. And Kingsley, I know a lot of issues were actually raised by the guests. You were on set yesterday. What are the likely issues we're looking at?
Well, yesterday we had the benefit of the presence of the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission.
Yeah.
That's Engineer Elias Mbam, and of course a member from the House of Representatives, chairman of a local government area, plus of course another analyst who himself had served in the local government system and was most recently Commissioner for Information in Adamawa State. The key highlights of the conversation yesterday, which of course we'll have the opportunity of getting the excerpts, the visual excerpts, just before we get into the second conversation today, is to get into the history of the last revenue allocation exercise that was undertaken. And that, of course, happened during the military era in 1992. Now, as at the time that new revenue formula came into existence, there were only 30 states in the Federation. But by 1996, you had 36 states in the Federation. And of course, 774 local governments. But of course, the percentages were always there. There was a clarification made by the chairman of the commission. Usually it is said that the federal government has about 52.68%, but he said no, that if you averaged it, it came to about 48 point something percent. And that the differential is accounted for on the fact that the federal government actually holds in trust some of the resources, the funds that are used for ecological purposes, also used for stabilization as well as development of natural resources. But of course, there are matters arising as to the actual disbursement of those funds held in trust by the federal government on behalf of all the tier tracts of government.
And if I could recall, because I was watching from home, another issue that was raised was as to in terms of having like checks and balances on the local government as to how they spend or how they actually, actualize the use of these funds.
Well, that's a pertinent question and an issue, of course, that will keep, arising. And I'm sure that in today's conversation we'll also have that because the political dynamics have altered considerably. There are issues with regard to the management and control of local governments in the country. So if you are asking for more funds to be allocated to them, will the local governments actually have access to those funds? And crucially also, there were two other issues that arose. Fine. 2006 was the last time that Nigeria had a national population census. And we also do not have a 5-year or a 10-year national development plan. How will these issues interface with the proposed revenue allocation formula?
Well, I know that a lot of these issues we'll be, talking to our guest about this morning on the program. We have great guests in the studio who will be speaking extensively to this issue. It's on that note, we welcome you once again to another edition of Good Morning Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you join us. We're broadcasting live from our studios here in Abuja, Nigeria, on Africa's largest TV network, NTA. I'm Rhoda Anonam.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague, Rhoda, in also welcoming you to this edition of the program, and in course of which we have our usual complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here's our colleague, Abdul Malik Adio. Hi, Abdul Malik.
Good morning, Kingsley and Rhoda. Here's the morning news. All is now set for the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development Japan 2019, which opens today in the city of Yokohama, and of interest is to Nigerians will be the benefit of President Muhammadu Buhari's participation at the conference.
Nigeria has benefited significantly over the last 3 years. So the meeting here is to essentially take stock of that and then to plan for the next 3 years. And then also it's an opportunity to have bilateral meetings with significant sectors for the Japanese business and government sectors. For instance, with 200 million people, Nigeria should be one of the hubs, manufacturing hubs for Japan to be assembling cars in.
Well, the federal government says it will sustain social intervention programs aimed at empowering Nigerians and increasing investment opportunities towards achieving an economically viable country. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo disclosed this during the official flag-off of Trader Money Scheme in Kefi and Karu local government areas of Nasarawa State.
I'm excited to hear the testimonies of the traders who have done so well after getting their first loans. And it's also exciting to see that they're actually paying back very quickly, because as you pay back, you're able to get more. You know, the way it works is that for trader money, when you get 10,000, you pay back, you get 20, you pay back, you get 15, you pay back, you get 20, then 25, 30, all the way to 100,000. So what we want to do is to expand it so that more people, more traders can get this money and get this facility. So we need to do more.
Now, broadcasting, no doubt, is an instrument for national development, but if not properly utilized, it can also serve as a tool for discord in any setting. This was pointed out at the 2019 annual lecture of the National Broadcasting Commission in Abuja.
It is constructive, and if it is productive, the country moves ahead. But if it doesn't, then there is a problem.
We monitor stations. Well, we need to sanction. A lot of times we don't even sanction people. We bring the stations and show them their scorecard.
Nigeria is seeking the support of international development partners towards actualizing the National Action Plan to end open defecation by 2025 and bring water, sanitation and hygiene to all Nigerians by 2030. The Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu, made the plea at the 2019 World Water Week in Stockholm, Sweden. He told the global audience that Nigeria's government is also making conscious decision to open up opportunities in the Nigerian wash sector to the international development communities, to support the effort through establishment of new partnership in the development cooperation and investment for the development of requisite skills, competence, technologies and financial system. The minister, on behalf of Nigeria, signed a memorandum of understanding with the chief executive of Water Aid on the new partnership. Now, the Anti-Human Trafficking Agency in Nigeria, NAPTIP, has described as falsehood a report by the Human Rights Watch saying rescued trafficked persons in rehabilitation shelters are being detained unnecessarily. At a press briefing, Director General of the agency, Julie Okedunli, said such report should be disregarded as the agency is guided by the national policy on protection to trafficked persons in Nigeria.
The Human Rights Watch report mentioned some unnamed officials of the agency, as well as unidentified victims whom they claimed to have spoken with, and they never spoke to any authorized person. This is quite curious. Again, why would the organization visit the headquarters of the agency for inputs a few hours to the release of their reports, and also did not reflect the comments of the official they interacted with?
Now, President Muhammadu Buhari, as subject to Senate confirmation, approved the composition of the board of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, made up of 16 members with Pius Odubu as chairman and Bernard Okumagba as the managing director. A statement by Olusegun Adekunle, permanent secretary, General Service Office in the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, explains that the interim management, headed by Professor Nelson Barambaifa, has been directed to hand over to the most senior director in the commission, while the chairman and members of the new NDDC board are to report at the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation on Monday, 2nd September 2019 for proper documentation and briefing. A Minister of State for Labour and Employment, Senator Omotayo Alasho-Adura, says with the current technological advancement in the world, it is apt to develop, explore, adopt and deploy technology in the public sector in order to meet the needs of today and the future. This was at a two-day productivity and innovation summit with the theme leveraging e-government as a vehicle for increasing productivity and improving public service delivery.
I think this type of workshop that is being organized there today, we highlight all those things.
So the knowledge and ideas they garner from here today will invariably tell on the productivity in their various offices.
And that's the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Rhoda.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is village Elmaster tune.
So, Auntie Amebo was not gossiping then?
Village Elmaster is celebrating 50 years.
50? Already? This is not a joke.
It is a national celebration. NTA and Village Elmaster family are commemorating 50 years.
Hey, please, tell me, when is our golden jubilee?
It is from the 8th to 11th of October, 2019.
I have to go and get ready. It's time to party.
Women. But we, men, will be there too.
Please.
All right, you're welcome back. And if you're just joining us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria here on the NTA. Now, let's go to some business news as the Ministry of Finance begins verification of ex-Nigerian Airways workers across Lagos and Kano states. We'll get more details now from a business news correspondent, Comfort Amadu.
Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has begun mop-up verification exercise for ex-workers of the former Nigerian Airways. The week-long exercise aimed at ensuring the eligible beneficiaries are audited will hold concurrently in Lagos and Kano states, after which their entitlements will be paid. Permanent Secretary Special Duties in the Ministry, Dr. Mohammed Dikwa represented, said the verification is in furtherance of the federal government's commitment to ensure that all former workers of the defunct airways receive their benefits. Recall that the Nigerian Airways in 2004 was liquidated without paying the entitlements of about 6,000 workers. In view of this, President Muhammadu Buhari in 2018 approved the payment of 50% compensation to all the ex-Nigerian Airways workers that have been audited. And investors lost 43.34 billion naira as NSE all-share index declines further by 0.32%. And in a bid to launch customer-centric product and leverage on strategic synergies and technologies to drive market participation, the Nigerian Stock Exchange will hold talks with investors, market data aggregators and other relevant bodies next month on ways to boost market data products in partnership opportunities. And in the meantime, the primary auction of Nigerian Treasury bills is scheduled to hold this Wednesday, 28th of August 2019. With Business News, I'm Comfort Amadou.
Thank you, Comfort Amodu, for the business package. Next for us on the program, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
And as always, Baya Toby is here this morning to give more depth and more insight into our review this morning. Baya, good morning. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Rhoda. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Right, Baya, good to see you as well. Now, the lead stories that we have for two newspapers, and probably also, I'd say third actually, it has to do with the judgment debt against Nigeria in the UK court. Now, the Punch newspaper captures it this way. We are challenging UK court's $9.6 billion judgment in the US, and that's attributed to the federal government, with three riders. Buhari orders EFCC, NIA to probe 2010 controversial contracts. The deal was designed to fail ab initio, says Attorney General of the Federation, Malami. And the last rider there says, judgment and assault on every Nigerian. That's attributed to the Minister of Finance. As I said, that's also the lead story for the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint captures it this way with a kicker. US $9.6 billion UK judgment. CBN hasn't, that's to say, has no record of gas projects. And that's attributed to the CBN Governor, Emefiele. And of course, the other riders indicate what is afoot. Buhari orders probe by EFCC, and this is IGP, that's Inspector General of Police, and damages over compensation and unjustifiable, according to the federal government.
All right, let's take the Daily Times. Just as Kingsley, you indicated, it's the same story that is on the Daily Times this morning. And that's the lead story for the Daily Times. It's a $9 billion dollar judgment debt. It says Buhari directs EFCC, NIA, IGP to probe contract with riders there. Says federal government senses foul play. Vested interest colluded with conspirators, says lie. And then PID claims that it spent $40 million on botched contract. Not correct, says Emefiele. And then let's just beside the nameplate, it's there. NCC approved spectrum for 5G trial, and then court hears IMN's prescription motion today. It's on page 3. And then let's go to the bottom of the paper. That's below the picture story. Buyer suppose APC disqualifies ex-Cross Rivers INEC chief from primary. That's on page 7. Also on page 7, Secondus wants PDP give aspirant in Kogi Bayelsa against frivolities. And on page 4, okay, now on page 15, Chinese nationals, 3 Nigerians drag IGP Adam to court over illegal detention. All right, but let's begin with, of course, President Buhari saying that, you know, the AFCC, the NIA, the IGP should probe this contract. What are we likely to see?
Well, this came from the press briefing by the Minister of Information yesterday, and he was joined by 3 other persons, the Minister of Attorney General of the Federation, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Finance, and the Governor of Central Bank. And the brief provided was that the federal government is to challenge the award of $9.6 billion against it in U.S. courts. And why U.S. court is because the P&ID has actually submitted claims both in the United Kingdom and the United States of America. The minister said the president has also directed the Economic Financial Crime Commission, the Nigerian Intelligence Agency, and the Inspector General of Police to investigate the activities of and processes of the industrial development contract. The Minister of Information added that the federal government suspects foul play in the 2010 contract, and interestingly, the contract was meant for 20 years. And in spite of the fact that the contract has not been completed or even started, the PID is demanding compensation. However, the Attorney General of the Federation also gave a detailed background. He said the PID never preferred the 20-year contract processing agreement at all, and PID is claiming arbitration over loss of profit for 20 years when the project has not begun, because if it was signed in 2010, it was supposed to have carry over up to 2030. We are now in 2019, and they are claiming damages for the project for 20 years. And so the Attorney General says, so far, a U.S. court has been engaged to stand in for Nigeria, and Nigeria has also asserted that as a sovereign state, it has a right of immunity, which it is asserting in the court. Experts are also advised that damages awarded are unreasonable, manifestly excessive and exorbitant, and also went beyond legitimate protection of commercial interests. The contract the Attorney General added was designed to fail ab initio. Already the Governor of Central Bank says they don't even have records of that contract in their votes.
Well, Bayo, you recall we mentioned this in passing yesterday, and this is a running story, and we'll continue to have more. As we said, some of the persons who were involved in the contract at the time it was entered into, some of them no more. The Minister of Petroleum at the time, Dr. Rwanda Lukman, for instance, and the late President Umaru Yar'Adua, who was president, of course, of the Federation at the time. But, of course, many more issues will come up, and we do hope that there is no attachment of Nigerian assets worldwide as the judgment beneficiary, or now the judgment creditor, has been head to brag.
The minister cleared that yesterday. He said Nigeria assets everywhere are not under threat, at least for now.
At least for now. Yes, okay. All right, Bayo, let's return to the Punch newspaper and take a look at other headlines. Above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, electricity tariffs grow threefold in 4 years. That's page 23. Lagos Assembly probes Ambode over 45 billion naira vehicle purchase. Nigeria, a laughing stock in oil business. That's according to the Minister of State Petroleum, details on page 26. Now, one of the two earpieces there, I've never visited Dubai, and protest, not cool, according to Shawore. That's there in the one of the earpieces on the Punch newspaper. And below the photographs there, of course, let's just take the caption for the two photographs on the front page of the Punch there. 3 died and 69 injured as truck crushes BRT bus. This, of course, took place in Lagos. BRT bus is the bus rapid transit system in Lagos. Details of that story, pages 4 and 5. You can see there, that's the logo of Dangote Cement that is there. That's a truck that rammed into a bus. 3 persons dead. Repentant Zamfara bandits battle recalcitrant ex-colleagues, page 9. Missing federal high court judge found in FCT filling station. You raised this issue yesterday. Missing federal judge found in FCT filling station. That's page 9. Will floor APC in Bayelsa and Kogi Post as PDP bragging there. Details on page 18. Now, why we hiked Nigerian applicants' visa fees, according to the U.S., page 39. And family tackles army for Bedouin farmer's death. Rape. Police grilled Fatoyinbo for hours and granted bail. Details on page 19.
All right. The other interesting story is that the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mohammed Bello, has told secretaries, departments, and agencies that every minister has been set a target, and therefore all heads of units must key in to ensure that the targets are met possibly and also exceeded. He said this while he resumed office with the Minister of State, Dr. Ramatu Tijani Aliyu, and specifically he told them that this heartwarming that residents of Abuja will now see tremendous focus on projects that will have direct bearing on their welfare as residents. It may be recalled that recent and persistent rain have revealed challenges with drainage in parts of the Federal Capital Territory. Flash floods have claimed some lives, and some houses have been flooded, and other places have been inundated. The Department of Development Control has raised alarm that it's going to demolish 120 houses, and the Minister of the FCT must tackle how those houses grew up within the floodplain and who approved them. The other interesting story is coming from the National Finance and Intelligence Unit. It says 80 Nigerians indicted for alleged cybercrime in the United States are to have their financial transactions that have reached Nigeria to be reversed and sent back to the United States. NFI Director General Modibo Haman Tukuru stated this at the sub-regional conference of illicit financial flow. He says 80 persons are before a California court on conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and bank fraud. Already, EFCC is working with the NFIU and has arrested 28 suspects on the FBI list here in Nigeria. About $314,000 has also been recovered. The NFIE also revealed that raging crises in the Northeast as well as Northwest are being allegedly funded by illicit finance from some groups. And therefore, to stem this, the NFIU is working with Nigeria's intelligence agency, Nigerian Immigration Service, and the police force to deport officials of some civil society organizations. Nigeria has about 52,000 registered civil society organizations, and many of them, it is alleged, are engaging in illegal activities and illicit financial flow.
All
so
right,
this is a very critical, CSOs, particularly in Borno State, was also causing a lot of problems with the fight against insurgency. So much so that the Borno State government raised concerns about portfolio CSOs.
Yeah, I recall the secretary of the Borno Elders Council.
Yes.
That's Elder Gubio. We had him once on Good Morning Nigeria. He joined us from Maiduguri. One of the issues he raised on that occasion had to do with the deluge of NGOs in Borno, in particular in Maiduguri, that you had hundreds of them. There had been a spike in rentals, and then there also been high cost of all kinds of items, and they were not sure what those NGOs were doing. Succor wasn't going to the IDPs, and yet you had several persons on ground claiming to be NGOs. But,
all right, very quickly.
Sorry, just before you take the editorial, I don't know, for the benefit of our viewers, yesterday you raised the issue of the Federal High Court judge who discharged himself from the hospital. That story has been reported now by The Punch, indicating that the judge who discharged himself from the hospital has now been found at a filling station at Nyanya. That, of course, raised some concerns as to probably the real nature of his ailment. Yes. Okay.
All right, so let's quickly take our editorial. Editorial is on the Nigerian pilot. It's on page 3, and it's on the high rate of deaths on malaria-related diseases. As a new report by the World Health Organization Strategic Advisory Group on Malaria Eradication shows that this trend is very, very disturbing, and it's actually unacceptable. It's calling for an increased commitment to ending or at least bringing malaria to its barest minimum.
Yes. Well, the editorial is happening on the fact that the World Health Organization Advisory Group, it says that there is concern for malaria. And not only that, because it has found out that there are 5 countries, including Nigeria, account for 50% of malaria cases around the world. And it is happened on the fact that about 438,000 people died from malaria in 2015, and particularly in the African continent, the most vulnerable are children below the age of 5. And therefore, the editorial is saying that there should be increased domestic and external resources directed towards fighting malaria, and there must also be political will to fight malaria. Meanwhile, it may be recalled that recently, just about 2 weeks ago, there were reports that there are prospects of discovery of a vaccine that will help against malaria. If that sails through, it will be a long breakthrough. But until now, it's emphasizing that we should resort to using insecticides and mosquito chemical treated mosquito nets.
All right, thank you very much, Mayo, for your insight today. One issue I wish we had time was, of course, the visa issuance fee by the U.S. Embassy that has just been increased. That's a story that's trending, and I hope that some other time we'll be able to take a look at that. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll start our conversation. All right, you're welcome back, and if you just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Now, to kickstart our conversation on the second leg of our topic, that's the revenue allocation formula, we'd like to just give you a recap of some of the assets of the views from our guests on the program yesterday. And when we come back, of course, we have guests here in the studio to do justice to that.
Everybody feels that he's supposed to get more. And you know, there are two major things people struggle for: power and control of resources. So each person wants, each group wants to control the resources. And so no matter what you are getting now, you feel you are not getting the proper distance. But the formula is not about what you get, it's about responsibility. If you have higher responsibility, you are supposed to get more to be able to address those responsibilities. So it's not a question of you wishing. It's a question of the process determining what is due and fair and equitable to you.
Local government administration, as the third tier of government, deal with the grassroots directly. And every form of development comes from an environment, and the government usually is the grassroots. So the competition, even from the beginning, whatever was the rationale behind it, was not being fair to the local government at the beginning. And that has empowered the development of the local government across the country. So all this while, the agitation that what has been coming to the coffers of the local government is certainly not enough for it to be able to carry all these responsibilities. As a matter of urgency, let that be the political will by this current administration to be able to review the revenue share formula. And by so doing, the local government across the country should be able to have the largest share and let them give the local government the complete autonomy to control their resources.
I think a review is necessary, but the Constitution has an exclusive legislative list for the federal government only. There is a concurrent legislative list where the federal government and the state governments can operate, and there's a residual list which is exclusive again to the lower levels of governance. Now, this constitutional platform determines the operations of the different tiers of government. And I think that if we're talking about reviewing the revenue allocation formula, somehow, it must go pari passu with devolution of some of these powers. Some of the things that are in the exclusive legislative list are too bogus. We could devolve a lot of other things to the lower levels, which are very closer to the people, so that we can, because the whole essence of revenue allocation is to stimulate economic development, economic growth, and ensure a better life for the people.
The revenue sharing formula, as it is now, is not backed up by any form of legislation. It was a unilateral decision by the executive at the time. And we don't think that's right, because you must take governance to those who need government the most. And it impacts on our people. So we think that the revenue sharing formula should be reviewed, and it should follow proper legislation. From the Commission, the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, the proposal is supposed to be sent to the executive, and the executive will send to the legislative arm for proper legislative work. But that has not been done. And so what is existing could be said to be ultra-vires. And we cannot continue existing like that.
All right, Victor. Thank you very much there for the excerpts from yesterday's conversation. Then just to add that the last bit of the excerpt was actually rectified in the course of the conversation. The chairman of the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Fiscal Commission did have the opportunity of responding to that viewpoint, because the last exercise in terms of revenue allocation was carried out in 1992. And of course, that was by way of the proclamation of a decree, or promulgation rather, of a decree. This morning, we have 4 guests with us in the studios, and we are continuing the conversation, as my colleague Rhoda earlier indicated. It's a pleasure to welcome now the Executive Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje. Your Excellency, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay. I'm happy to be here.
All right. And also with us in the studios, I would like to welcome a familiar face on the program. Is a distinguished senator representing Niger North. Is now the Deputy Whip of the Senate, Senator Sabi Abdullahi. Senator, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
You look very fresh, eh? You're on holidays.
I'm trying to.
All right. So joining us for this discussion this morning, we'd like to welcome back the Chairman, Revenue Mobilization Allocation Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam. He is also with us here in the studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And also with us this morning is the former NBA Chairman of Lokoja, and he's a former Chairman, Kogi Local Government Area, Kogi State. He's Shaba Ibrahim. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin this discussion with His Excellency Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje. This is the second term, so let's get your take as a governor. What is your thought on the current, sharing allocation formula? What's your thought on a call for a review of this sharing formula?
Thank you very much. There is no doubt that there is outcry from the stakeholders, but that is from the local governments, from the states, that there should be a review of the revenue allocation in Nigeria. And coincidentally, the legislature has the constitutional powers to review the formula. The Constitution 1999 as amended, there's a provision that the National Assembly during its own lifetime, 4 years, should be able also to review, could attempt to review the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And by so doing, then the revenue allocation formula could be reviewed. In my own opinion, the review of the revenue allocation could be examined from 3 perspectives. First of all, the vertical distribution, the horizontal distribution, and also the derivation issue. These 3 areas need to be examined seriously in order to have a fair distribution of revenue in Nigeria. The vertical distribution, if you look at it, the federal government is having 52.6%. The states are having 26.7%, while the local governments are having 20.6% to be shared among the 774 local governments in Nigeria. Now, let us look at the functions, because it is based on some responsibility that is the money has been allocated. And if we look at the concurrent list, that is where the federal government and the state government are sharing certain responsibilities, especially in the area of human development, that is in the area of education, in the area of health. And if we are to attain the sustainable development goals by year 2030, then you can see that the role that the local government are playing and the role that the state government are playing must have enough funds in order to do it. So let us look at the aspect of education. The federal government has Federal Minister of Education, the federal government has universities, the federal government has polytechnics, colleges of education, and also the regulatory bodies for the universities, regulatory bodies for polytechnics, colleges of education, even regulatory body for the basic education, that is the UBEC. Now, the state governments are also having such institutions, except the regulatory bodies. And even the National Assembly come up with the constituency projects of which they delve into issues, programs that are undertaken by local government, programs that are undertaken by state government using the federal government money, and also even in the health sector. So to me, that responsibility, the federal government should confine itself to universities and the regulatory bodies of the institutions, like the examination body and so, and others should be should be given to the state and the local government. And that will reduce the amount of the money allocated to the federal government. I suppose 10% should be removed from the 52.6%. And that 10%, 6% should be given to the state, while the 4% should be added to that of the local government. The same thing with the horizontal distribution. That is the distribution, the allocation among the states and among the local governments as well. That one should be reviewed as well, because we are saying 40% on equality of state, 30% on population, then 10% on efforts in IGR, internally generated revenue, another 10% on geographical, land mass, then 5%, 4% on education, 3% on 4% on health, and 3% on water. If you look at it, especially the first two parameters, that is the issue of equality of states. Some states are 3 times more than other states. So then, if you look at the population, you are talking of education. And the population is always increasing. Especially now we are talking of education for all. All out-of-skilled children should be within the system. And therefore you need more money in order to do that. The same thing with the issue of health. So I believe there should be a review of the revenue allocation formula, even for the horizontal aspect, even for the derivation. The 13% given to the oil-producing areas is meant to take care of all the problems that are emanating as a result of drilling of oil in those areas. But if you look at it, some funds has been now allocated outside that 13%. First, the creation of the Ministry of Niger Delta. Second, the Niger Delta Development Commission. Third, the Niger Delta, the money that is being given to those youth that are causing problems. Amnesty program. All these things are outside the 13% that is given to the states. And another crucial issue is that of onshore and offshore dichotomy. You see, because the oil that is being drilled within the deep sea is not a territorial, is not part of any territorial area of those states that are benefiting from the revenue, from the derivation area. So you can see that it is only the oil that is drilled within their own territory that should be included in the 13%, not the oil that is being drilled within the deep sea. That is my own view about it.
Okay, Your Excellency, thank you very much. We will, in the meantime, pause you and then bring in the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. Yesterday, when we indicated that, look, the popular figure known to most Nigerians with regard to federal government receipts is 52.68%. You sought clarification. This morning, the governor of Kano has again repeated that same popular figure of 52.68%. What is the actual receipt for the federal government in terms of percentage allocation?
The actual receipt of federal government is 48.5. The other additional that makes it 52.68 is made up of 1% ecological fund, 1.68% development of natural resources, 1% FCT, and 0.5 stabilization. These are what is called the special fund. And the special fund is held in trust by the federal government. It does not enter into the constituted revenue of the federal government. It's not part of their receipts. And in every FAC, every month is announced the amount outstanding in each of these special funds. So it is because of the Supreme Court, which I said yesterday, ruling in 2002, that instead of giving it directly to Ecological Fund Office and all that, they had to include it in federal government because the law does not allow any other beneficiary except federal, state, and local government from the federation account. So it's not federal government money. Federal government money is only 48.5%.
Your Excellency, your reaction to this, and in particular,
yes.
How have states as beneficiaries of the amount held in trust by the federal government, how have they benefited from what is being held in trust on behalf of the 3 tiers of government?
I'm happy he said the amount is in trust, but there is mistrust. Because there is no, like the revenue allocation formula, we are saying, there is a formula for it. But the federal government does not have any formula in disbursing the amount. The ecological fund, what is the formula for the distribution of the ecological funds? And all others. So I believe, though it is in the hands of the federal government, but the way the federal government disposes the money is questionable. Certainly the states are complaining, the local governments are complaining, because you have a problem, and then the person who will execute the problem comes from the federal government, and the money comes from the federal government. What is the difference between that money is with the federal government? If you have an ecological problem, all what you require is to submit that you have an ecological problem. And then the implementation, the execution, the disbursement of funds is from the federal government. So virtually there is no difference. That money belongs to the federal government. So that 52.6% stands, because the little, that you are saying is disbursed also by the federal government. The same thing as if the allocation has been done for the federal government. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, well, that is purely maybe administrative area. But I can assure you that every month the FCT collects their 1% from that 52. You can ask the council, the area councils. They allocate the 1% to FCT. And the other things, like stabilization, I know some states that are benefiting now from stabilization.
But all the states are supposed to benefit.
No, it's not.
So if you,
no.
If you have a trust concept, I mean, that's a lawyer is here as well. So anyway, continue, Chairman.
What I'm saying in effect is that if you don't have need for, you don't have an erosion problem, if you don't have ecological problem, it's not meant for everybody. And what is more to, excuse me, just one minute. They meet regularly. The governors, the vice president, and some heads of some federal establishments, including the Minister of Finance. And they ask questions sometimes about this fund. There is an opportunity to ask where it has been spent. But it's available. And I'm sure the federal government does not spend it at will. We, as a commission, resist anytime the federal government wants to spend the money outside this 48.5, because it's not their money.
All right, let's get your take, Senator Sabi Abdullah. You're already smiling.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. Definitely, the topic is very, do I call it? Is very thought-provoking, and as much as I fully align myself with the, thought by His Excellency, I think I would like to come from another angle. My own angle is to say we want a review. Now, as a researcher, if I'm told to review something, the first thing I would like to do is to first ask what has been the performance of that same thing up to the point in which I should review it. And I think, to my mind, this is where, if we want to do justice to this subject matter, we have to concentrate and give our energy to it. All these allocations that have been made, to what extent has it contributed in answering the question the Constitution set for itself, that the primary purpose of government is the welfare and security of the citizens? Anything outside this frame, I think, will just be more or less playing to the gallery or even evoking sentiments which will not help the Nigerian people. My take here is, honestly, there is much to be done. And the critical stakeholders must come out very sincerely. Because first and foremost, we are Nigerians. First and foremost, we come from somewhere. And that same place where we come from, whatever language or grammar we blow, simply because we are opportune now to be in leadership position, we will come back to the hard reality that the ordinary Nigerians are facing. And that is the issue of the welfare and security. Because today, as we speak, we know the challenges. And to my mind, the number one challenge which this country is facing is the issue of security. The issue of insecurity that has pervaded almost every, nook and cranny of this country. And I think if you look at it, you will know that it is not exactly the structure. It is more or less like our actions or inactions at these various layers of governance that is responsible for the things we are seeing. Because in many instances, I know where are these crises happening. It's at the grassroots level. That's why some people say it's rural banditry, isn't it? That is, that has taken over. And the level of kidnapping that has, before, kidnapping is done in the urban area, but now it has gone back to the rural area. So the question to ask is, why is it so? And I think it is simply because that space has been abandoned completely. There is no government. In those layers, governance has ceased to exist at that level. And I think if we take an assessment of what is happening or what is not happening, then we can begin to understand that, look, there is more to it than we are talking about. So I would not want to say that, yes, there is need for a review, but that review must be anchored against the backdrop of what the performance has been. And therefore, if we are going to review the revenue allocation formula as it is, for example, I would want to see certain critical changes that are made in the way governance is being made. And with due respect, what I have seen today is we don't have local government. We are only pretending. Local government at that layer, with due respect, and it is a general thing. Yes, there may be one or two exceptions. There are states where maybe if you go, you see some semblance of what did they call it, governance happening at that layer. But the majority of states, honestly, I stand to be corrected, but majority of the states, nothing is happening at the local government level. And so in situation where yet, it's like I saw a script somewhere where somebody is saying, but they are collecting the money for local government. So where is the money going to? They are collecting 20% what percent? 6. And where is that money going to? I'm from a particular local government, and as far as I'm concerned, to the best of my knowledge, I cannot really relate the quantum of money being allocated to my local government with development that is happening right now on the ground. I cannot relate.
Okay, Senator Sabi, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, two perspectives, from the legal perspective and then from the local government perspective. A number of issues on the table. But let's get your general comments first before I would like you to respond specifically to the trust concept that was being explained a bit quizzically, if you ask me, by the chairman of the commission, Honorable Ibrahim.
Thank you very much. Ab initio, let me state that the revenue allocation formula, as we have it today, is cannot be sustained and it's not unjustifiable. It is too skewed in favor of the center. But there's no way you are going to conclude this discourse without also looking at it from the point of view of responsibilities. I personally take the view that the federal government has no business with so many things it has set out to do as it is today. I'll give you an example. Under the Land Use Act, every land within the confines of this country either belongs to a state or a local government. The federal government has a humongous allocation of funds to the Ministry of Agriculture. You start wondering, for a tier of government that has no inch of land properly so-called to itself, what is it doing with the Ministry of Agriculture? You see, the center has been so overburdened with irrelevancies that even its primary responsibilities are beginning to suffer. So I'm going to begin from the point of view of devolution of powers. And that has to be a holistic amendment of the Constitution to take off some of those functions that is distracting the federal government from the primary purpose of government, which is the security and the welfare of the people. Having said that, I agree with Senator Sabi that to the extent that the local governments exist on paper only, substantially in many councils. I am aware that in many states, you still have this contraption called caretaker committees and what have you. They are mere appointees of government of the governors, their excellencies meant for round-tripping of funds. You take in, it goes in through the right and comes out through the left. I know what I'm talking about, and I'm saying it from a point of considerable certainty. The local governments are the whipping child of this contraption. If I would also comment a little on what His Excellency has said. His Excellency seemed to focus too much on the federal government and whatever. The states are also a burden to the local governments. As the state governments on their own. The governors have, and I don't see why it should be so. I'm beginning to see the local governments as their babies. They dictate, even in democratically elected settings, you see the interference is unpardonable. I don't know why it should be so. The federal government is doing its own bit, the state is doing its own bit. So I propose a holistic overview of this. I'll give you an instance. What will the National Assembly, for instance, or the State Assembly be doing in the name of oversight at the local government level? I think it's unnecessary interference. If the local government have their own legislature, let those legislators take care of those areas. Let the National Assembly, due respect to them, focus on their satellite, principally on the federal activities, and let the state assemblies also look. But if you look at it holistically, there are states where the assemblies also exist as rubber stamp to whatever their excellency's pleasure is. So I think that the overview, the review we seek should be holistic. It should come trickled all from the top down to the left. And the whole, the ordinary man, which are not too found in the cities, cozy cities of Abuja and where all the big men are resident, they suffer it most. So I think that we need to look at this critically. I personally do not agree that the states even have to take more than the local governments, because everybody belongs to the local government ultimately. So, but the one that is most critical, the one that is most, I don't want to say annoying, is that of the federal government. And that is why, the bigger the head, they say, the bigger the headache. Because of the humongous amount available at their disposal, you have so many idle agencies here and there that don't have any bearing with the life of the common man. All they wait for is allocations here and there, and they just take and they, whichever way you look at it, they are also hot beds. It breeds when discretion is involved in revenue allocation and disbursement and everything, impunity sets in. If you have too much discretion, that is my take.
The other part of it, maybe we'll return to it presently, and that has to do with the trust that the monies that the government is holding, federal government is holding in trust for all the 3 tiers of government. The commission chairman has indicated that he has said some issues. What is your reaction to that before we bring in the governor again?
Yeah, with due respect, I think the distinction is that between 6 and half a dozen. It does not exist. It exists on paper only. If the money, yes, you have a trustee, you have a beneficiary. If the beneficiary cannot really benefit from the subject of the trust, it makes no meaning. In substance, I'm not going to argue with anybody here about statistics. I didn't come for a debate. But I want to say with all sense of responsibility that the disbursement of ecological funds and all those funds graded under that subhead, where the Honorable Chairman alluded to, are at the absolute discretion of the federal authorities. And in most cases, they are whimsical. In most cases, they are guided by political considerations, and so forth and so on. The degradation is everywhere. They may be more in number, but why should some states have and others will not have? Why should the monies that are meant for, if you are a trustee, you're supposed to hold it for the benefit of the owners. You're just like a repository or a conduit. But in this case, you have a guard that has become stronger than the tenant, the landlord of the house. That cannot be a system that we should crave for.
Thank you very much, Shaba Ibrahim. Let's get the thoughts of Your Excellency now on the issues that Senator Sabi has also, Abdullahi has raised, and that's the issue of what has been done as we call or clamor for a new sharing formula, what has been done so far with the one that has been disbursed, and then the issue of local governments. What happens to funds that go to local government? Speak to us from the perspective of a state governor.
Thank you very much. I'm happy when he mentioned that before we request for review of the formula, we should assess the performance of the federal government, the state government, and the local government. And based on that, then there should be a review. That is quite true. And if he stands by that, then let us look at the exclusive list that is maintained by the federal government, like the security. Are we faring well in terms of the security? So if there is insecurity problem now, so it means that the money meant for security, there should be some kind of devolution of responsibilities in order to have all-encompassing security in the country. Because security to some extent is also a local issue, like he mentioned. So we are now talking of, community policing, while the fund is in the hands of the federal government. The state government are spending a lot on security, and the money belongs to the federal, is supposed to come from the federal government. The state government are spending on allowances and for the military, for the police, for the civil defense corps, and so for so many other arrangements in terms of security. So you can see that if there is a devolution, then there should be the state police to some extent, so that community policing can be enhanced. And that certainly will require the review of the funds that are being allocated to the security. And pertaining to the local governments, yes, it's true there is abuse here and there using the funds of the local governments, but in my own view, you see, the local government should be independent in terms of managing their resources, but while we are clamoring for that, there should be manpower development at the local government level, because that is what is lacking. And fortunately also there is funds for manpower development, which is not well utilized in some places. So if local government can have, well-trained and experienced personnel, then they could be able to operate their funds judiciously and effectively if they have their own well-trained engineers, if they have trained quantity surveyors, they have well-trained medical doctors, then the local government can also operate, with optimum, can operate and use their funds optimally. But in the absence of that, but that does not mean that the local government should not have their own money. Even let them have their own mistake, then the mistakes can be corrected. That is my own views. So sadly, to review the allocation, then local government should be given more funds so that they can train their people in order to manage the local governments.
Well, Your Excellency, yesterday when we took on this subject, there were a number of tweets that came in with regard to the relationship between the states and then the local governments. And the bottom line, according to some of the proponents, is, look, by the time you add the allocation figures for the states, the local governments, the states and the local governments will have jointly something like 47.3%, which is very close to what the federal government has, which is already 48%, on the basis of what is often known as the emasculation of local governments. And so, look, local governments have no financial autonomy. They have no control. Recently, I'm sure Your Excellency is aware of the directive issued by the NFIU, that's the Financial Intelligence Unit, to the local governments as to the processes or procedures for spend, not more than 500,000 naira in terms of cash. Every other thing else should be e-processed. And strangely, some persons said state governors were opposed to this.
Well, you see, the main reason for that is a problem of the Constitution. In order to disperse the funds, we have to abolish the state and local government joint account, which is in the Constitution, and which has not been disbanded. You see, so there's a constitutional problem there. Two, you see, there are certain common services that are being undertaken by the local governments under the supervision of the state government. And if such monies are not, put together for such services, then eventually you will have problems, like the salaries for teachers, like the funds meant for the traditional institution, like some joint projects that are cut across the local government, but to be sponsored by the local government, then there must be, an arrangement where such funds could be made available for the functionality of such, execution of such projects. So I think unless if that state and local government joint account has been removed, then there's a constitutional problem. But to allow the local government to have their own funds, I think that is the best way. They will be making mistakes, quite okay, like the states are also making mistakes. The federal government is also making mistakes. So, but gradually, the local government will come of age if they are to control their own funds.
Yeah, I think Kaduna State has set an example, even without a constitutional amendment, by abrogating the state-local government joint account. So the monies go directly to the local governments. But that's the point we'll note in the meantime, Your Excellency, and return to it. Senator Shabir Abdullahi, one issue, while the governor was speaking earlier, he didn't seem to have touched on the exclusive legislative list. Only lately when he was down saying, look, in evaluating the performance, let's look at security, for instance, and the matters that are under the exclusive list. But he touched on what you have, say, on the concurrent list, where the federal government would appear to be overburdened by responsibilities that states can on their own shoulder. And part of that point has also been articulated by one other guest. I'm wondering, from the lawmakers' point of view, because this draft will always come to you anyway for processes of passage into a law, what is likely to be the Assembly's disposition to the club, or to say, look, tinker first with the lists before getting a new revenue allocation formula that would align the allocation formula with the responsibilities and the schedule of responsibilities as well?
Well, thank you very much. I think the issues are very clear now. The 8th Assembly carried out a substantial amendment to the Constitution. And the most critical one on this subject matter, which His Excellency touched about, is still with the state government, that is the local government autonomy. And the hindrance to that autonomy is that provision about the joint account. And we have amended it. In fact, we engaged all the critical stakeholders, the NUT, the local government employees themselves, and all other people who have interest on this subject matter. And of course, the amendment was done in such a manner that it will take care of these joint services he talked about. In fact, the provision says very clearly that, of course, the first line charge, we introduced the issue of first line charge also. Teacher salary, the health issue, all of this will be first line charge. But as we speak, up to the end of the life of the 8th Senate, we did not get the required 24 states approving that the local government should have autonomy. So what are we talking about? The key issues, with due respect, is that even within the context of the joint account, what the joint account says is that this is a pot. Federal government has brought the allocation, that 20.6% of the local government put in the pot. The states, you also generate your revenue, bring your own share of that revenue, put inside, and then you say, okay, I have 40 local governments or I have 20 local governments. How do I now share? Distribute. You now distribute to them and let them go and do their responsibility. But to the best of my knowledge, and like I will say, I stand to be corrected, the money as we know it is being spent from that same pot without the money getting back to the local government. And as we have it, that is why our local economies are dead. I remember those days we used to have local government economy, local economy empowerment, and development something leads.
Yeah, well,
when we have the seats,
part of
for example.
Needs, yeah.
So you could see the whole intendment is that development should be at that level. Now, we are talking about exclusive list, what did they call it? Concurrent list and the like.
Residual, yes.
Today, as we speak, honestly, it is because there is failure. There is a vacuum. No system lives in a vacuum. That is why you find the federal having to come and do those same things that my brother is saying the federal government has no business doing. And to that extent, we do respect for those of us who are in the National Assembly, for example, but for the fact that the requirements of people to the basic tenets of their life, water, some good roads, all these basic things that are lacking. It is to that extent because if you ask a local government, for example, how many roads have they been able to open up? Feeder roads, for example, as we call it. The feeder roads are not there. In some of the states, you will see that, okay, they will ask them to go and buy graders. They will go and buy some of these heavy equipment so that they will use it. Beyond the ceremony of flagging it off, you can't go back there and go and see anything happening. After 2 years, those same heavy equipments are auctioned. This is the situation we are facing. So, and I think that is why, if we look at it today, the federal government is indeed burdened. I agree with that. But honestly, they are burdened because there is need to actually help the people. If you know you can do something, you will not fold your arms while your people suffer. If I know I have the provision to squeeze out something and get my people to have a borehole, when ordinarily, if the boreholes are there and all why should I come and do that? But these things are not there. I remember those days, there used to be a common programs in the state. They call it, is it Rwansam? Where they have drillers and the like to drill boreholes and all over. All of these things are no longer functioning because the money meant for the local governments to be able to do these services are not getting to them. So what do we do? We fold our arms and allow the federation to collapse? I don't think that is the issue. So I think for me, the opportunity that we have now placing these issues on the front burner of our national discourse is such that, like I said, honestly, we need a thorough assessment and evaluation of performance of all the 3 tiers of government.
Who will undertake that assessment?
Ourselves. We're in responsibility now. The governors, for example, with due respect, they have a governors forum. And I knew in those days, I think about, in the early beginning of our, democracy, they used to have what they call a peer review, taken from the African Union, the African Union, the NEPAD. There was a peer review mechanism. I was the Federal Minister of Agriculture, and I knew with respect to the issue of agriculture, which you talked about, we were actually having a review of how this thing should be. And in the agricultural policy, there was actually sharing of responsibility with the state, the local government, and the federal. And to that extent, for example, many proponents are saying the federal government should align itself to research and development, because that itself is a public good and cut across. If we develop a seed here in one particular location, it can be applied all over. So if we can take a holistic view of these issues from these various perspectives, we can get these things right. But all of these things require political will, and to my mind, the biggest political will must come from the state governors.
And not the federal government?
The federal government has ever been willing, because the 7th Assembly reviewed the Constitution and made many changes, which never came back positive.
All right, Your Excellency,
the same thing with the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Senator Sabi says that the federal will is, the political will is there at the federal level. Where is the will at the state level?
Well, that is his own understanding. Because you see, when we are talking about the performance of different levels of government, let us take the security issue. The issue of kidnapping, the issue of cattle rustling, the issue of banditry, the issue of armed robbery, the issue of drug addiction. You know, all these issues are issues that can be handled effectively by the federal government, the state government, and the local government. Therefore, if there should be a devolution of responsibility to be assigned to these 3 tiers of government, you find that the local government and the state government should take a lion's share of the money meant for security. Now the federal government is controlling the Air Force, controlling the Army, controlling the police, controlling the SSS, controlling the civil defense, all under the federal government, while they are doing their function at the grassroots level. So you find that there is a disconnect. So what we are saying, in as much as the federal government can control such organs of security, also the state government should be able to have at least the police, where you can enhance the community policing in our respective local government and states, and that will improve the security situation in the country. But a situation where we are now, the federal government does not have enough policemen. The state government are left with paying a lot of allowances to the security agencies, investing even in capital investment, like the tracker issue, buying some vehicles, communication equipment, and certain things in order to have peace and stability in the state. But the money is in the hands of the federal government. So if you are talking of the performance of the different tiers of government, and you take security into that, then I think there is a need to adjust the exclusive list of, security, so that it will become concurrent at a certain level.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje. Now let's get Shaba Ibrahim's thought. Is the federal government overburdened? Are we seeing the federal government take up some of these responsibilities because they're not being carried out by the states and the local governments?
No, with respect, I don't subscribe to that view, that it is because they are not being carried out by. Because let's even start from the primary responsibility of the federal government itself. How well has it fared? I think it is a lack of will to allow those who sole responsibilities at the local levels to carry out what their constitutional responsibilities are that is left, that has occasioned this interference. If you look at it, let me give you the analogy. This is supposed to be my bit. Like His Excellency said, we all have to learn somehow, have to learn how to crawl before we start talking of walking and running. There's no opportunity here. Ab initio, those at the top view those at the lower rung as being inept or what have you. I don't even think it has to do with ineptitude. I think it has to do with the crave for too much power. I want to be everywhere. With due respect, is because people just feel that if you devolve this power, it's an encroachment on their sphere of influence. That is why they are doing that. It's not because the local governments have failed. I know of local governments that have built roads that have even, asphalt roads that federal or state governments have not built. I can conveniently tell you that, at least from the experience from my own state. So, with respect, sir, the issue is not as simple as they sound. The issue is let everybody keep to the sphere where it has comparative advantage. If you don't have land, farming is an issue. You don't have to go and borrow. If you have land, ab initio, most of the farms are in rural lands. Even the state governments, their intervention in agriculture should not take prominence over that of the local government, because with respect, most of the farmers are in the rural areas. Save for some big corporations here who can, maybe like those days when you have Guinness farms in Mokwa and stuff like that. So I am saying, sir, that the issue of that interference is not actuated, is not occasioned by a lack of performance per se at the local level. Is this pest for power? I want to be in control. I want to be everywhere. That is why, not even being able to exhaust what the Constitution has saddled them with, they have forayed into other areas and I also, if you permit me, I want to talk about the joint allocation stuff between the local government. You see, the agitation for an abrogation of that system has nothing, with due respect, to do with the intendment behind that legislation. What it was intended to do is to bring about some symbiotic cooperation between the local and the states. It is the abuse prevalent in it that has led to the agitation, not the law itself. Somehow the states have perfected the art of, let me give you an instance. If this allocation comes and it goes into it's supposed to go into a common pool, the state is supposed to contribute a certain percentage of its own internally generated revenue. I challenge any governor to say that I have been complying with it. How many of them have been complying with it? Rather, the one that comes from the revenue, direct from the allocation you have from the center, is also being tampered with. That is the problem we have. The law itself, I've been issued. If we're going to respect the law as provided, it has no issues.
It has no issues. Okay.
All right. That's my take, sir.
All right, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, thank you very much. Let's bring in again the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Engineer Elias Mbam. Yesterday on the program, you described the process that is usually undertaken when a review is being contemplated. And one of the points you raised was the fact that, okay, you look at what has been allocated to a tier of government, for instance, what it has spent on, say, education, and so on, and all of that, what it has spent on health, and you see over a 5 or a 10-year period, and that would then guide you as an index of what to allocate next time. And one of our guests did say that rather than looking at allocation simplicity, shouldn't we go to the issue of outcomes? Yes, we have budgeted so much. What are the outcomes? Which is a point that Senator Sabi Abdullahi has also raised today, to say, look, evaluate performance. Spend is one thing, but outcome is another. What's your position today?
Yes, thank you very much. I think before I address your question, I want to make some clarifications. I quite agree very well. There is need to look and review the responsibilities of each tier of government. But whether it is necessary to do that and wait before reviewing the formula, I think the answer is no. Because even within the context we are operating now, the principle that operated at the time these formulas was reviewed last, and what is now has changed a lot. Take, for instance, ecological problem. The desert encroachment has increased, erosion problem has increased, flooding has increased. Take security. Security wasn't such an issue then, but now it's a major issue. Administratively, more states have been created. So there is really need to review it even before, as it is presently. When finally the issue of review of responsibility comes, we can review again. After all, the National Assembly started reviewing the Constitution even from the 7th Assembly. So we don't even know when this will come into being. So, but meanwhile, let us review the formula based on changes that has happened in the principles we use in the allocating fund. 2, when His Excellency was speaking, he questioned the issue of equality that we allocate. As far as it's a state, there are minimum responsibility of a state. A state must have a governor. Whether it is the size of this country or the size of one local government, it must have a governor. It must have administrative setup. And so this is areas we look at and say there are some responsibility that whether you are big or small, it goes across. And you still have the advantage of size with population. Population has 30% presently. We can look at it as, is this adequate? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? But I think there must be need for a percentage for equality of states. Then, on the issue you asked about the indices
that are used to say, look, the Commission normally will consider what has been spent, say, on the sector over a period of time, what has been allocated, and probably what has also been spent, rather than the outcome.
I think,
and therefore effectiveness.
We should not mix good governance with responsibility. If you are given a responsibility and they are giving money and you abuse it, the outcome will not be there. And so if we look at outcome alone, what of bad governance, bad local government chairman? The outcome will be bad. Will that then determine how much we give to them? It is a responsibility, which we look at expenditure profile, their budget. We look at their budgets for the year. We know very well that many of them do not implement those budgets, but at least it's a guide. We look at the budget profile, the expenditure profile for a particular period of time. And that's what we call objective treatment, because it is that budget that determines what is required in that responsibility to be able to address the problems.
Would you find this approach satisfactory, either of you, Shaba, or...
So just a minute before
yes.
So what we do is that there will be objective approach and subjective. All these, their suggestions are subjective. But the ones that we collect data and analyze are the objective one. So it's a mix of the two that finally form the final document. But certainly, the objective will be higher.
Do you find this satisfactory, Senator Sabi?
Yes, I think, to my mind, in any performance evaluation or system, definitely if you have more of the subjective, then already the output will be subjective. And I think I agree with him that what we should be looking at here is the objectivity. And so to that extent, if you focus more on the outcome and you are getting negative outcomes as a basis, then what you are doing is you are actually rewarding bad governance, like he has said. And I agree with that totally. So I think what we need to look at is, in doing this review, all that some of us want to see is to be very objective and honest by our own self, because we are all stakeholders every single Nigerian is a stakeholder in the Nigerian project. And the fact that I'm privileged to be here today does not mean I will be here perpetually. So the question we should begin to ask is, what if I'm not there? What is going to happen, or what is happening? Will I condone it? And I think if we can be very objective to ourselves, then we can get the right answers. And I think, like he has said, we must bring in indices or indicators that we up the objective scale as against the subjective scale. Because the clear fact today is that there are truths about what is happening. And I think those truths have facts that we can use to appraise and say that, look, we need to take this kind of decision so that those who are in charge, like Barrister said, must be given the right responsibility to be in charge, so that when these funds come, the funds will be applied for the right purpose that they are meant to be.
All right, Shaba, you want to respond to this very quickly, because the chairman appears to be saying that, look, when it appears, allocations are for responsibilities, and the issue of good governance or bad governance would appear to be immaterial.
I think he scored a bull's eye there. But the issue is the man saddled with that responsibility the one that is most fitted or suited for it? I think that's the main issue here. Sure. That's the entire basis of devolution we're talking about. I agree with him. But if you have no business with a particular responsibility, let's take it off, and don't debate it. Don't try to argue about it because you want to be seen everywhere. So I agree with him, but again, the issue must be, we must understand it from the perspective that is being driven. The issue is, what business do you have with those responsibilities? And that takes us back to the question of devolution, which goes straight back to my brother's court. They are the lords of the manor. They should go about this constitutional amendment and ensure that those things that, if we have a provision that is being abused or prone to abuse, what we need is, if we can't get the operators of the system, we can't whip them in line to fall in line with the Constitution, then the lawmakers must also learn how to shoot without missing.
Okay.
That's my take.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks a lot for your responses so far. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we already have a number of tweets that have come in. We'll try and take some of them and then return to our guests. But you can still send in your tweets using our Twitter handle at Nta Gmn. You see it there at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Can I see your particulars, sir?
Officer, my particulars no dey here.
In that case, you'll have to come with me to the police station.
Officer, which levels? Where I for find you something make you take arrange your weekend.
What? Offense number 1, driving without particulars. Offense number 2, trying to bribe an officer of the law.
I won't harass Nigerians or take bribe. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Right, you're welcome back. And if you just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. And of course, we've been looking at the proposed review of the revenue allocation formula. And we have all of our guests still with us here in the studio, the Executive Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullah Umar Ganduje. Of course, we still have Senator Sabi Abdullahi, Elias Abam is also still with us, and Shaba Ibrahim. But then we have tweets as a way of contribution from our guests, just as Kingsley indicated before we went on that break. If you have any questions, you have contributions to our discussion this morning, of course, you can still tweet at us at Nta Gmn. We still have our guests here in the studio to speak to some of your questions and, of course, your contributions. But Kingsley, let's start taking the tweets that we have.
All right, we have one coming from Adekunle Olayemi. Adekunle Olayemi tweets, it's a good idea. That's the word of revenue allocation review. If the 3 tiers of government will use it judiciously and not give room for embezzlement, it will be very helpful for the states and local governments to provide social amenities at the grassroots.
Dele Jack Solomon tweeted, said, truth be told, proposed sharing of revenue allocation between the 3 tiers of government is realistic and achievable. This will also help state governors pay the adopted 30,000 minimum wage.
Revenue allocation is not to enable states to pay minimum
That's his major
wage.
concern right now.
Absolutely, that's right. Anyhow, Titus Monday Knock tweets, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the revenue sharing formula, but corruption and embezzlement ought to be checked so as to enable the provision of services at all tiers of government.
Low Alpha tweets, Low Alpha C tweets, said whatever is the revenue formula, only the federal government can be said to be effectively utilizing their own chunk to fix infrastructure and pay workers' salary as at when due.
Ahmed Mohammed, in terms of revenue allocation, it is the local government that suffers. They usually end up getting chicken change from the states. So the best thing is to actualize local government autonomy, and 90% of the problem will be solved.
Dele Jack Solomon tweets again, says the proposed review of the formula, if holistically implemented, will go a long way to end the litany of poor social economic amenities like health care, educational facilities, and portable water, months of unpaid salaries in states.
Now, Ohaku David, do we really need local government to benefit from the revenue sharing of the federation? Why not just let it be between the federal and state governments?
And Oninye Victor says, needless overflogging this issue when all we know is that corruption is the problem. Otherwise, nothing is wrong with the revenue sharing formula. Politicians are frustrating all well-thought-out economic plans for their selfish gain.
Amogbola Humbabs has this tweet. The current formula needs a review. It's long overdue. State government administration has evolved over time with bigger responsibilities. Let there be an upward review for the states and local governments, but with close monitoring by anti-graft agencies to prevent reckless spending.
Francis Obi says this system should be scrapped altogether, but let the states pay a percentage of their revenue generation to federal government.
Badamasi H. Adamu, what matters most is the practical implementation by political office holders. Until and unless our leaders embrace positive values and have an ethical revolution, we will not achieve changes from what happened in the past.
And Abdulaziz Abdul Rao says, what is the opinion of the legislator in the panel about the introduction of mayors for cities and urban areas?
That's not the issue we're discussing this morning, obviously. That will create another administrative center, and then you have more funds, to allocate to those centers. Anyhow, Akeju Olagbaju tweets, the revenue allocation formula is due for review to shift more resources from the federal to other tiers of government, such as the states and local governments, to enable them to deliver service and good governance.
And then Mohammed Mustafa says, I agree with the senator that there is no local government. It only exists on paper. The fact is that some local governments don't even have primary health care, talk less of water or light.
Now, James Palm tweets, revenue allocation issue arose because the central government has arrogated to itself all revenues, thus making nonsense of federalism. Let's define our federating units, let them own revenue sources and pay royalties to the center. Size of the central government should also be drastically reduced. We already have our federating units clearly defined in the Constitution. And by the way, the federal government does not arrogate to itself all the revenues that come to the federation. We have a percentage, and that's what we are discussing this morning. Now, Rhoda, I think it's useful to bring in the chairman of the commission once again. As part of his opening salvo, the executive governor of Kano did talk about the horizontal allocation. We'll be talking essentially about the vertical, which is to say federal, state, and local governments. Now, the horizontal, which is usually among the states of the federation. And it ticked off some of the percentages, equality of states, population. And part of the worrisome aspect, the figures that he talked about that would conduce ordinarily to human capital development, education, and health, those percentages appear to be paltry. What are your comments on this?
Well, that is the need for the review. The need for the review is to look at what is existing. I know whether within this period, these principles that we applied, should we change it? And that's why we have invitation for memoranda. We have public hearing, so that people will make comments on each of these principles. But as of today, the principles we use include equality of states, about 40%. Population, 30%. Internal revenue generation, because we want to encourage every state, because both state and local government do not care to generate revenue again, many of them, because there is something to pick from Abuja. So at the end of the month, they send the accountants to come to Abuja and pick money. And I asked, how many local government collect bicycle license, radio license, those basic fees that the law allows them to collect? So that is where there's a provision to encourage state and local government to improve on their internal revenue generation. Then we have for social developments, which includes health and education.
What are the percentages for IGR on health and social development?
It's 10%. No, it's when you split it, it's under social development.
No, IGR is 10%.
IGR is 10%.
IGR is 10%.
It's 10%.
Land
mass is also 10%.
Because education and health.
4% each. Two of them belong to the main principle, which is social development.
That's
8%.
That's 8%. And then we have terrain, wetland, highlands, and plains.
What is the percentage? What about balances?
It's 3%. And each of these subheads have reason for them. I've talked about equality of states. Population. Population will require more money for children to go to school because if a place is more populated, they will require more resources to cater for the inhabitants. So that is why they have that. Then I've explained about IGR. And then on land mass, when it is difficult, take for instance Niger State, your own state. From Abuja here to, it is very difficult for a state if we don't take that into consideration in allocating resources to develop. Because if we do not look at even development, we may not be getting it correctly. Because a hungry dog and a well-fed dog hardly stay together.
So what happens when...
So what I'm trying is that all these are factors that we apply. And during this review, we are asking the Nigerian public, we are asking Nigerians, these factors that are being applied now, how do you see it?
If we had the time, we'd come back to you. We're running out of time. Now let's get the closing thoughts of Dr. Abdullah Umar Ganduje.
Thank you very much. I think we are discussing about the horizontal allocation, of which we mentioned all the indices. But if you look at these indices, you find that some are constant and some are changing with time. So I believe if we are to tinker with that, we should look at those variables that are changing. And those variables that are constant, then we do a right assessment and leave them at a constant level. For example, the equality of state. Yes, I know every state needs a governor, every state needs some ministries, but all these are recurrent expenditures. And I think 40% is too much for equality of state. That is why people are clamoring for states. A very ethnic nationality will clamor for state because they know that there is a minimum amount of money, 40% out of the national cake will be given to the state. I think we should look into that. Now, the issue of population. The issue of population changes. It's not constant. Especially now we are talking about sustainable development goals, 2030. How far have we gone? We must look at the issues of education. We must look at the issue of health. We must look at the issue of sanitation. We must look at the issue of unemployment, poverty. All these issues are related to population. I know the issue of corruption is there, which can consume almost everything, whether at the federal government, state government, or local government, you can consume whatever is being given can be consumed. So in order to review the revenue allocation formula, when we are talking about the horizontal aspect, I think those variables that are changing with time should be given priority, while those are, because land mass is land mass. Like the example you have given to Niger State, yes, land mass, Niger State does not increase its land mass, does not decrease its land mass. So that is my view about this horizontal aspect in terms of
just you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I agree with His Excellency, and I think to my mind, this is where we actually need the bulk of the work. The example cited with Niger State, for example, because of the problems and challenges of climate change in the frontline states, Niger State now is receiving more people, internal movement of people, villages and towns that are springing up that were not there 20 or 30 years back as a result of internal movement. So the issue of population that keeps changing, I think, is a key factor. And I think the area I have seen clearly from all of this discussion that can receive a bash very comfortably is this issue of equality of state. While I agree that it is there, but I think we need to tinker with that particular percentage while raising the provision for these social development areas, because that is where the key challenges today we are dealing with.
And on the issue of ecology,
but sorry, finally, before I come down, I think for my understanding, I would like to say very clearly that whatever we do, whatever system we put in place, that attitude that we carry into governance or followers is key to bringing a resolution to all the issues we are discussing. Because responsibilities are given to people on paper, funds are matched to it, and that trust, the earlier the theory of trust, all of us are in trust. Our being here today is a trust. So what is important is for us to know that we are carrying whatever opportunity we have for the Nigerian people in trust, and we must be truthful about it.
Shaba Ibrahim, 30 seconds.
Let me hold sail holistically. Let me adopt Senator Sabi's final talk as mine. I have nothing more to add.
All right.
I agree with him completely.
You concur?
I concur. Absolutely. You need the political will, you need the mindset to drive home whatever system you put in place. Otherwise, everything we're saying here will fizzle in no time. I agree with him.
Thank you, gentlemen. We want to say a very big thank you to all of our guests who have joined us this morning. Of course, a very big thank you to the Chairman, Revenue, Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam. You joined us yesterday, and of course, again today. Indeed, we sincerely appreciate your time and your thoughts.
And thank you for giving us this opportunity, because we have kick-started the review.
All right. Also, a very big thank you to Shaba Ibrahim. He is the former chairman MBA Lokoja, and of course, a former chairman Kogi Local Government Area. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's my
and
pleasure.
of course, Senator Sabi Abdullahi is a senator representing Niger North and Deputy Whip of the Senate. Thank you for coming on the program.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course, a very big thank you to His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Kano State, Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganjuji. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sports is up next.